What's going on, everybody? My name is Austin. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Absolute Superman issue 15, where Superman is starting to become that symbol of hope that we really all know him to be. I won't keep you waiting. Let's get right into the issue. So the issue begins at the Kent family farm in central Kansas, where Clark says it takes a few weeks, but Smallville starts to feel like Smallville again. No more news crews, no more Lazarus Corp, just the wind and the stars and the smell of fresh cut hay. Folks say it's as quiet now as it ever was. I smile and nod when they say that, and try not to flinch at the noise, as Clark looks away from the tractor he's working on into the distance. Day and night, there's always the noise, more all the time, from farther away. I try to focus on one sound to tune out the rest. Cicadas, heartbeats of the heifers a few pastures over, church choir in Topeka. Never works for long. There's always someone somewhere who starts screaming. So I do what my folks would have done. For this, they call me Superman, a name I've never cared much for. But it doesn't matter what anybody calls me. I know who I am. As we see him fly past a cafe with people inside, and a lady sitting down says, at this rate, he ain't never gonna get that tractor fixed. And the waitress says, you watch yourself out there, Clark Kent. And it's here that we can see Clark attaching himself to a dam to stop it from collapsing inward with the help of his cape. And I love what they're doing with Superman's cape. It's actually really functional instead of just serving as a fashion statement. And in this particular instance, it almost acts like a symbiote of some kind, where it is reaching out in different strands and stopping the dam from collapsing. We see a speech bubble that says, Mr. Schott, sir, I'm afraid another fire has broken out at one of the factories. Shall I send the usual thoughts and prayers? Mr. Schott. We then find Mr. Schott, who is trying to protect himself from the flames around him. And Superman says, Winslow, Schott, we need to talk. There was a fire at one of your toy factories, the fourth fire in less than 2 years. Last time, 73 workers died, some as young as 12. And you walked away with a fine and a slap on the wrist. And Winslow doesn't even seem to care. He's just worried about all of his toys around him. And Superman says, consider this your last slap on the wrist. You became a billionaire off the backs of children working 16-hour shifts, breathing lead and benzene, making toys that sell for more than they're paid in a week. You're going to correct that imbalance, Toyman, or I will do it for you. And Winslow says, my God, what are you? And Superman says, ask Lazarus Corp what I am. People like you atop your mountains of wealth, you live your lives so high in the clouds, so far above everyone else, you've always been untouchable. I want you to tell your friends, those days are over. None of you are untouchable. Not to me. As we see, Clark has burned a hole in this guy's building. And Clark, still with rage in his eyes, says, change your way of life, Winslow Schott. I'll be watching. And I have to say, I love what Jason Aaron is doing here. Superman is becoming the true champion of the oppressed. This is something that I feel gets kind of forgotten sometimes in modern Superman stories. A lot of the times I feel like we get caught up in these grand multiversal events, and a lot of the times I feel that the element of the little guy is kind of forgotten in those stories. Anyways, we go out to the Nevada desert where Superman is searching for Brainiac, but Clark says he's not here. Doesn't look like he's been here for weeks, but this was definitely his lab. I can smell him in every part of it. Smells like death and rotting madness. Smells like Brainiac as he looks on the ground to see the destroyed, bottled cities that Brainiac has kept. Clark says, you were right. He kept miniaturized alien cities, populated cities, and subjected them to all manner of deranged experiments. There were millions of beings in these bottles, screaming for help. I should have heard them. And I know what you're thinking, but I already checked every last one. All these cities stolen from different alien planets. I couldn't help but hope, but no. There's nothing here from Krypton. Nothing at all. I miss you, Sol. And Sol's lifeless AI says, command not recognized. No such program detected. Clark looks around and says, everything is so broken here, Sol. I don't know that I can do this without you. I don't know if I can do it at all. We then go to Pakistan, where Superman has decided to pay Ra's al Ghul a visit. And initially Ra's says, come to gloat, have you, boy? Perhaps you're more cruel than I gave you credit for. Go ahead. Relish your triumph. You earned the right. Behold, the mighty Ra's al Ghul. as he withers away. Clark says, your jailers assure me you're being afforded proper medical care. Is this untrue? And Roz says, I am beyond their care, boy. I've been denied the Lazarus Pit treatments that have sustained me for centuries, denied by my own company. It would seem my removal from office was not enough. The ungrateful shareholders wish to distance themselves from me permanently. They'd better pray I die in this cell, as should you, Superman. And Superman says, I didn't come to gloat or indulge your threats. I'm here because you're right about one thing, Mr. Al Ghul. This isn't finished between us. Roz says, oh indeed, child, you have made an enemy for life in the demon's head. But Clark says, that's exactly what I've been afraid of. On Krypton, the Law Guild gave life or death sentences for almost every crime. Criminals were executed or written off and never seen again. But I'm looking for a reason to hope here, and I'm starting with you. A few hundred years ago, you realized this world was headed towards collapse. You thought you might be the one to save it. But I think you forgot along the way what it was you set out to save. I'm hoping this can help you remember. As he hands Roz a pamphlet of some kind. Roz says, what is that? And Clark says, prayers, mantras, poems, written by children from the slums outside this jail, written for you, after their parents died in your copper mines or were beaten to death by your peacemakers. Roz laughs and says, you seek to rehabilitate Ra's al Ghul with the musings of orphans? Ha! You are too pathetic for words, boy. Yes, give it here, Superman. This jail has a shortage of toilet tissue. I will put this book to good use. And Clark says, no, Roz, not like that you won't. And Roz continues to laugh at the mere sight of the book. We then see Clark talking to Lois Lane, and she says, that fire in the Amazon, was that you? And Clark says, was it? What do you mean? And Lois says, they say it stretched for 20 miles and then somehow just suddenly disappeared. Did you do that? How did you do that? Clark says, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to put it out, so I swallowed it. Lois says, you swallowed a wildfire? And Clark says, as much as I could, yeah, and then I moved it to somewhere where it could do some good. The Flint Hills in Kansas were due for a controlled burn. We then go to Metropolis where this actual conversation is taking place. And Lois says, you ate 12,000 acres of tropical wildfire and puked it onto Kansas. Is that what you're telling me? Clark says, I suppose you could say that. I didn't know what else to do. Should I have done something different? And Lois says, you're asking me? Clark says, Lois, I have no idea what I'm doing out there. Lois asks, is this on the record? And Clark says, what does that mean? And Lois says, can I write about this? Clark says, you know, I'd rather you didn't. And Lois says, Cal? Clark says, I'm happy that people heard your reports from the siege of Smallville and that you and Jimmy are getting job offers now. It's important work that you did. But you know how I feel about, Lois says, about being someone who could inspire billions? Clark says, I'm just trying to help. I don't need. Lois says, would you like to get a beer sometime? And I can't tell if Clark is taken aback by the question or if he's just listening to something in the distance. But Lois says, you have super hearing. I know you heard me. Clark says, I heard you, Lois. And well, you see. Lois says, you can swallow wildfires, but you can't get a beer with me. And Clark says, Lois, I could, sure. It's just. And Lois asks, iced tea, coffee, kombucha, something, anything? Cal? And he asks, which way is Peoria? She goes, well, I think it's that way. About, I don't know, 160 miles or so. Why do you? And Clark takes off from the top of the building at the speed of light, leaving Lois alone by herself, and she says, you watch yourself out there, Kal-El. We then go back to the Kent farm, where Clark is meeting up with Lana Lang. And Lana says, wow, you've really fixed up the place, Clark. It's looking great. And he says, thanks, Lana. And Lana says, I heard the bank finalized the papers. After the avalanche of negative press, Lazarus was sure quick to divest itself of all Smallville holdings. The Kent place is yours now. How's it feel? Clark? And he's wincing in pain and says, sorry, so much damn noise. And she asks, you sleeping much, Clark? He says, sometimes I lie in the clouds to recharge, but someone always starts screaming. Lana says, Clark, what you're doing, it's amazing. The people you're saving, the Kents would be so proud. But more than anything, I know they'd want you to take care of yourself. All of Smallville wants the same, including Mrs. Crabtree on Arapahoe Road. Should I? And he says, yeah, just put it with the rest of the casseroles. I'm gonna fly that into some kids in Sudan. And as someone who is from the Midwest, casserole is probably the most fitting food for this scenario. Jason, Aaron, thank you for this. Anyways, Lana continues and says, Clark, I know you've got a lot of work to do. And he says, yeah, I want to get the field ready for planting, the way the Kents would have done it, no powers. And Lana says, well, if you happen to have a free moment, maybe you could stop by the diner for, But before she can finish, Clark is gone and out the window. She looks up and says, right. Maybe next time. I like the new look, Clark Kent. Black was never your color. You were in mourning, I get it. But Martha was right. You belong in blue. And this is very interesting because I like what Jason Aaron is setting up. He's setting up Lana Lang and Lois Lane as love interests for Clark. Obviously, this is always something that we've seen from Superman comics, his original love interest being Lana Lang, and then finding his one true love in Lois Lane. I'm very curious to see how Jason Aaron handles these love interests going forward. We then return again to Pakistan, where Clark is still trying to redeem Ra's al Ghul. And he says, at first, Ra's laughs and mocks me as I read. After a few weeks of daily readings, the laughter ends. And Ra's says, I will find these street rats and tear their guts from their bloated bellies while you watch. Clark continues reading to him and says, in the name of the sun's divine light, may you know the peace we were denied. May you know the strength of mercy. And Ra's says, give me that book so I can feed it to the dogs. Clark says, Ra's never touches the book. Reports of a hurricane off the coast of Portugal. I tell myself I have enough time for a few more rows. I know I can't be everywhere, but I try. Miles away, a car goes off an embankment. Passengers only have a second to react. Feels obscene to listen. Feels more obscene not to. Ra's continues and says, I will raise these slums to the ground. I will hang everyone you love. And Clark says, our breath is the breath of the ones you tried to bury. He continues his inner thoughts and says, there's a child in Thailand, body riddled with cancer, no family. She doesn't want to die alone, staring at the ceiling. I make sure she doesn't as he flies her out to look at a mountaintop. After the child dies in my arms, I spend the next hour alone in the stratosphere, screaming so loud it knocks satellites from orbit. And Clark continues reading to Ra's, saying, we are not dust. We rise from it. We will build the world you refuse to imagine. And we see Clark in the sky screaming, and he says, screaming to try and drown out the screams. How long can I possibly endure this? Clark says, in the name of the sun's divine light, may you know the kindness we were denied. And we see the lack of Lazarus Pit treatment is really taking a toll on Ra's. He's starting to look very, very old, a lot more like his age. And he's still trying to intimidate Clark, saying, I will gouge out your eyes and die. We then see Clark holding up a bridge using his cape, continuing and saying, long enough to see a world slip through my fingers all over again. I am killing myself just to give them more time to suffer and stumble. More time. Is that a gift or a curse? It depends on the day you ask me. All I know for certain is that this is home now. Kal-El of Krypton, Clark Kent of Kansas, Superman of Earth. They are all me. And Clark finishes saying, you buried us in chains, yet we are still alive. Clark says, and sometimes for a moment, lost in the blue, we all get to close our eyes and remind ourselves that the noise means life. Survival is never silent. The cacophony means we're alive. It means we have hope. It's the silence we should fear. And finally, we see as Clark continues to read these poems to Ra's, he actually starts to repeat them, saying, in the name of the sun's divine light. And Clark repeats it too in the sky, in the name of the sun's divine light. But he is in constant pain from the screams that he keeps hearing, saying, and the people who will fight to keep us quiet. An absolute Hawkman appears in the sky next to him and he says, what the hell do you think you're doing? Now this is really, really dope. I love the full look at absolute Hawkman. His costume is so cool, and I can't wait to see this brawl unfold next issue. We then go to somewhere in Missouri where we catch up with Brainiac, and after the siege of Smallville, he decided to flee. He was no longer interested in working for Lazarus Corp. Someone tries to call him, and he says, you have reached the offices of the Brainiac algorithm. All operators are busy at the moment. And Talia al Ghul says, cut the shit, Brainiac. Where the hell are you? And he says, hello, Talia. I've missed you so terribly. She says, Lazarus is being ripped to shreds by the press and the lawyers. I need you with me, fighting to save what we can, and figuring out how we're going to rescue Father. But he says, no, I'm afraid I won't be doing that. And she says, what did you say to me? He says, consider this my resignation. I'm busy pursuing other avenues. Best wishes to you in your future endeavors, Mrs. Al Ghul. And she starts to freak out on him and says, you legless freak, have you forgotten where you were when we dragged you out of the trash heap? I will. But before she can finish, Brainiac hangs up on her, and he begins to walk towards a house with the name Luther on the mailbox. Because as we saw in the Absolute Evil one-shot comic, Brainiac was very, very interested in recruiting Lex Luthor to join the Absolute Justice League. And now it seems like he's taking matters into his own hands and just going and showing up to Lex's house and recruiting him himself. Anyways, guys, that brings us to the end of the issue. I'm very happy with the direction that Absolute Superman is going in. The last couple of issues have kind of been bogged down a little bit, but I think this is a great step in the right direction for the Absolute Universe, version of Superman. I've seen a lot of people saying he seems kind of bleak and kind of depressed all the time, and I have to kind of agree. It would be nice to see this version of Clark smile a little more often. But let me know what you guys think about this issue. What do you think about Absolute Superman in general? If you enjoy content like this, feel free to like and subscribe. I post new comic book videos every single week. And with that said, I will see you in the next video.